Good evening. It is now 6:37, and I call this regular meeting of the Victoria City Council to order. It is our tradition to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you are able, we invite you to join us. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda is announcements. We have a few announcements this evening. On Monday, July 14th at 5:30 during our City Council workshop, our city engineer will be presenting an update on the Highway 5 improvements. All meetings of the City Council, including workshops, are open to the public and held in the council chambers at City Hall unless otherwise noted. We encourage anyone wanting to attend our council meetings or workshops in person to contact our city clerk in advance. In other announcements, city offices will be closed on Friday, July 4th in observance of the holiday. With that, there are no further announcements, but we do have a proclamation to designate July as Park and Recreation Month. Whereas park and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this country, and whereas our parks, recreational areas, water access locations, and natural amenities is why Victoria is known as the city of lakes and parks, and our parks and recreation programs are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and region. And whereas park and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And whereas parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks and natural recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for our children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the City of Victoria recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now therefore, I, Andy Reif, the City of Victoria, do hereby proclaim July 2025 to be observed as Parks and Recreation Month. The City of Victoria invites all citizens to celebrate Parks and Recreation Month and supports the efforts to promote parks and recreation programs in all areas of the community. All right, our next order of business is to adopt the final agenda. Council, is there a motion to adopt the final agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the final agenda for this evening's meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move to our next item, which is the open forum. Open forum is the opportunity for anyone to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda and not in an application form that will be coming to the council at a future date. Please do not expect action from the council this evening regarding your comments. Council members may ask clarifying questions, but open forum is not intended to be a back and forth discussion. No one is registered to speak tonight, but is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda and not in application form that will be coming to the council at a future date? Anyone? Okay, seeing no one, we will now move on to the next item on our agenda, the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are routine administrative, do not require deliberation, or are housekeeping items required by law. Consent agenda items are approved with one vote unless someone requests an item to be considered separately. Ms. Hardy, does anybody from staff wish to pull an item?
None from staff, acting mayor.
Thank you. Council?
None for me, Acting Mayor.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to pull an item for a separate discussion and vote? Okay, can I get a motion for our consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Can I get a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Now on to our first agenda item, which is item 6.1, which is a variance request for 6407 Virginia Drive. Presenting this evening is Associate City Planner Travis Brierly. Mr. Brierly, welcome.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. Tonight is a variance request that has been submitted for an allowance to go above the 25% impervious cover within the shoreline district. This is due to a right-of-way easement that is going through the property that was submitted by Davis Thomas, who is in the audience tonight. Just a quick background on it. The application was considered complete back in May 16th, which means our 60-day rule ends on July 15th. And we did do a proper public notice in the paper as well as a mailing. When we're looking at any type of variance, we have to look at a couple things. One is the practical difficulties, which when we're looking to grant the variance, it has to be for a reasonable manner. There has to be applied to the landowner that is due to circumstances not created by the landowner. In addition, if it's granted, it won't alter the essential character of the locality. Another contributing factor that we can look at is economic considerations, but economic considerations alone do not create a practical difficulty. The other thing we look at is with our city code, strict enforcement and interpretation of the city code, especially anything that would result in practical difficulties. There's exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions that exist, and then if we do grant a variance, that it won't create an adverse effect upon the public. And then the other thing to look at is that granting the variance or the purpose behind it still would align with a permitted use within the zoning code. In this specific case, the request at 6407 Virginia Drive is to have a single-family home built on the property. However, due to a city project back in 2010, Thornberry Curve, when it was connected to Virginia Drive, went through the property through a right-of-way easement. On the left, the blackout area is the part of the property where the easement sits, and then on the right is just a quick aerial view of where that road goes through to connect. The purpose of the variance is based on a building permit application that was submitted by the property owner to build a single-family home, which is consistent in design and size as the adjacent properties in the neighborhood as a whole. However, to build that type of home on there, it would exceed the 25%. So what the overall request is that where that easement is, any hard cover that's in that easement area that is not included in the overall property calculation. However, the square footage would still, of the property would still include that. So when we do take a look at the request and the practical difficulties, we're looking at, is it a reasonable manner building the single family home? This is an R1 zoning. That's the intent of R1 zoning. The plight of the landowner being the circumstances that they did not create. It was a previous owner which had been asked by the city to have this right-of-way easement go through to connect the road. So it was a city project. It was city-led. The road wasn't there because of the property owner directly. If the variance is granted, it wouldn't change the essential character of the community because it is a single-family home that's in similar design size as the adjacent and surrounding properties. The economic considerations in here that it's still a single-family home. If we did limit or included the easement area against the hardcover percentage, then the property owner would need to build a much smaller home, which would be out of place with the character of the neighborhood. With all that being said, we have to think if a variance should be granted, if there's exceptional or extraordinary circumstances, and if there's any adverse effects that allowing the variance to be done would create, and then if it's approved, if there's any other reasonable conditions for approval. But, another thing to consider in here is that the property owner upon the build still has to meet all other city code regulations, all other building regulations, state regulations. So this is just on the 1% that's there. We do have a sample motion on the screen for to adopt or deny resolution 2025-39, which would allow that impervious cover that's within the easement to not be counted towards the overall impervious cover on the property, as well as reducing the permit fee from the $250 fee with a $1,000 escrow down to a single dollar for the entire permit fee cost. And with that, acting mayor and council, I stand for questions.
I just have a quick question for you, Travis. We have a proposed site layout, correct?
Correct.
Do we have an idea of what the percentage of impervious surface will be based on the proposed design?
Council member, the proposed use of the site without including the street would work out to 22.2% of impervious cover for the entire site. The right-of-way that's there is about 4,900 square feet, which is about 14.5% of the entire site.
Okay, so if I understand what you're saying is that we really are going down to about 23% coverage?
The council member, the proposed use is for the about 22%. They would be allowed to be up to the 25% because when we would do the calculation on the site, we wouldn't include any of the road into that calculation.
Okay, so I guess then, so that I better understand, what we're saying is that we're going to slice out this piece that is the road, and then we're going to apply the impervious surface calculation to the remaining piece of the parcel?
Yep. Council member, it would be to the entire parcel as a whole, as if the road wasn't there, is what we'd use for the calculation.
Okay, so do we have an idea of what that might be in terms of, are we talking that we're at 60% impervious surface? Are we?
If we were to take out the roughly 4,900 square feet that exist where the easement is, and you remove that from the total property size, then you'd be somewhere around the neighborhood of about 28% to 29% impervious for the entire site, just because you'd be shrinking that much out of the size of the property.
Okay, thank you.
Can you just explain why we did the road easement, or I mean, and maybe we don't know, but why it was a road easement versus right of way in the past? Like, was there a good reason that we did that in the past, and why we're changing it now, I guess?
Councilmember, I'm sure there's a good reason for it. Unfortunately, through my research, I wasn't able to find a very specific reason. I do know that the road was the road that's in the right of way. So if you look at the aerial photo, you'll see that there is right of way which still exists. But right about here, there's a dedicated wetland that's been designed. So to do the connection, it's either you shift to wetland, which is expensive to do, or you can go through an adjacent parcel with an easement. And that's what the city had chosen at that time.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I mean, to me, this is kind of an easy one based on the fact that this property would be below 25% if this street wasn't thrown here long ago. I watched the planning commission meeting. It was 22.2% if we don't have the road there, and then it was 28.5 or something like that with the road there. So it's not like the home and everything that's going in there is abusing the situation. They're at the mercy of a street being put through their yard because it was easier than going through and relocating a wetland. All things considered, it's probably the best option for everybody. I mean, I think this is a classic case of when a variance should be offered, allowed, granted.
All right, seeing no more council discussion, I will ask for a motion.
Motion to approve resolution number 2025-39 for a variance request of Victoria Zoning Code section 22-8D2A, permitting the property at 6407 Virginia Drive, Victoria, Minnesota 55331 to exceed the maximum impervious surface by 5,000 square feet with conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on. Item 6.2 is to review and consider 2 variances for St. Victoria Catholic Church. Presenting for this evening is our city planner, Brian McCann. Mr. McCann, welcome.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and council members. Yes, tonight we are considering 2 requests for variances from St. Victoria Catholic Church. The first one being a reduction in the front setback from 30 feet to 5 feet to allow additional burial plots on a property, and the second variance would be to allow an additional access for a proposed columbarium from Victoria Circle. So starting out with the location and area, it's 7 parcels in total, consisting of approximately 26.5 acres. They do have 3 existing access points from Victoria Drive or County Road 11. There are existing residential properties to the north and south of these sites. Church Lake is also to the west, as you can see in the image on the right, and Lions Park is just to the east. All of these properties are zoned and guided R1 residential, which includes places of worship, including cemeteries and memorial gardens, as a permitted principal use. Looking at the existing conditions of the site, they do have steep slopes throughout the property. There are also some heavily wooded areas present. There are some wetlands present, as you can see in the colored portions in the image on the right. The existing church building does have a existing parking lot with 234 spaces, as well as some additional on-street parking allowed on Victoria Drive. Now, all of these properties, because they are so close to Church Lake, are within our Shoreland Overlay District, which restricts the amount of tree clearing or vegetation management or grading that is allowed within bluff areas or steep slopes. And there are existing grave sites and an existing columbarium on the east side of the property, just about where my cursor is in the image. So looking at their first request for the access, and the central columbarium is located here, which is about 26 feet wide in total from one edge of the parking circle all the way to the opposite edge. It's about 100 feet. The parking on this circle would allow for up to 17 vehicles to safely get in, park, and leave the site. With this, they are also proposing an additional 250 grave sites, and they are working through a lot combination to combine those 7 lots that I mentioned earlier. So for that driveway, they are proposing that single access that I mentioned, highlighted in red there, and then a majority of funeral service users would come from the church parking lot near the actual church building and would utilize a trail, which I've highlighted in blue, on the southeast corner. The reason for this variance request is because they have to meet ADA requirements. Due to the slopes of the site, it's difficult to achieve a trail that would be compliant with a 5% maximum ADA compliant grade to get down to the site. So they need an additional access for funeral attendees who aren't able to get downstairs, as shown in the image here. So looking at the practical difficulties for this access, they propose to use it in a reasonable manner. A single access on Victoria Circle is a reasonable use to an otherwise limited access area. There are also many other driveways on Victoria Circle currently for the residential homeowners out there. Then the landowner's problem is due to circumstances unique to the property, not caused by the landowner. So access spacing limitations on County Road 11 mean they can't get any additional access points there. And their access down to this area is extremely limited already based on the grades of the site. And then the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. As I mentioned, driveways already exist on Victoria Circle, and they need access to meet ADA requirements for this area for construction. Looking at their second variance request for their setback, they are proposing to reduce the front setback of the principal use from 30 feet to 5 feet. The 30-foot area I've noted in red on the image on the right affects approximately 40 burial spaces, and this is 40 feet measured from the front property line. This isn't 40 feet or 30 feet measured from the front property line, not 30 feet measured from the edge of the curb. So in relation to the curb, the closest burial site, if it was approved, it would be about 20 plus feet at the closest point from the street. And then no other improvements would be possible within this setback. As I mentioned, to some of those shoreland requirements like steep slopes, limited grading, and vegetative clearing, as well as some easements that exist on the property. So looking at the practical difficulties for that, is it proposed to be used in a reasonable manner? They've operated the church and cemetery for over 100 years and is also a permitted use in our R1 district. The circumstances are unique to the property. There are steep slopes and presence of heavily wooded areas that I mentioned within the shoreline district, which limit their usable area for these improvements. And then lastly, it will not alter the essential character of the locality. As I mentioned, there are existing burial plots on the property already within 10 feet of Victoria Drive on the east side of the site. And then lastly, there is an active sewer stub located on the property. So our public works team did go out and scope this area. They discovered that there were 5 stubs, but the one stub that's highlighted in red shown on the image on the right does not actually connect to any existing services out there. So if the city council does choose to approve the variances tonight, we have included a condition to coordinate removal of that sewer main from the church property. And then a public hearing was properly noticed in the newspaper, mailed to property owners, and displayed on the city website and at City Hall. We did receive a lot of correspondence on this one, which was provided in the packet for you this evening. Planning Commission initially held the public hearing and closed it, and then tabled the request for further explanation until their next meeting, which occurred on June 17th. And then they ended up making a recommendation to approve the access variance but deny the setback variance due to not meeting the unique property characteristic test, since the church would still be able to construct 210 burial spaces without the variance. And then just some additional context for the council to consider. Back in 2016, an apartment was considered for this site. St. Victoria took feedback at that time from staff and incorporated it into their current design. As I mentioned, it was constructed in coordination with city staff members, none who are currently present as far as I'm aware. And I did meet with the neighborhood on site for a neighborhood meeting a few weeks ago, and based on the feedback that I gathered there, the neighborhood does not support any additional access or on-site parking for the church site. They do not want any additional traffic in their neighborhood, as I'm sure you've noticed in the comments that were submitted to the council this evening. And that lastly, there hasn't really been any communication between the church and the neighborhood on the matter. And so what the Planning Commission tabled the item for to look at was the possibility of an ADA ramp. So a little bit of math here. The current slope of the site is about 15%, which is fairly steep. We're talking about a nearly 40-foot drop over 250 feet. The ADA maximum slope requirement is 5%. To achieve that, there would need to be significant grading, retaining walls, and a winding path. And even then, it might not still meet the 5% ADA requirement. And then again, I mentioned that neighborhood meeting on June 10th, they're opposed to the access and parking for the 17 vehicles, but there was support from that meeting for a 2 to 3 designated spaces on site with an access. And then there was also overall support for designated ADA maintenance spaces for the church on Victoria Drive. And this is a new slide that was not in the report. When looking at Victoria Circle and the potential of what could happen if both variances were denied, I measured the available parking area because parking is restricted to one side on Victoria Circle. If both variances are denied, the church could utilize that available public one side of the street parking on Victoria Circle. What that comes out to be is over 1,300 feet of available space, which could accommodate up to 70 vehicles for our average parking stall length of 19 feet. So 70 vehicles on the street compared to 17 vehicles contained to the site with an access is important information that should be considered. And lastly, based on the street width out there and on-street parking, that could present challenges for our fire department as well, due to the width of the fire trucks. So a few options to consider this evening. Option 1 being no variances. As I mentioned, the church could comply with standard zoning, which would mean on-street parking for Victoria Circle. And the closest burial sites would be within 46 feet of the curb. Option 2 is approving the access variance, but no setback variances as recommended by the Planning Commission. That would allow their current design, but their burial plots would need to be pulled back to that 46-foot mark. Or the alternative, approving the setback variance, but not the access variance. So they would have to figure out a way to do their maintenance or their services down there, likely utilizing the parking on Victoria Circle. And then they would get that burial space about 21 feet from the curb. Or an option presented in your case as well is approving both variances as proposed. I will note that with that, there are conditions in place to limit parking on street on Victoria Circle for funeral services and the removal of that sewer main that I mentioned in a previous slide. And then looking at the 60-day requirement, it was submitted on April 25th. The 60-day deadline falls on today, so a decision must be made by the City Council this evening in compliance with the 60-day review. Otherwise, the requests are automatically approved. With that, here is a list of suggested conditions of approval that were included with the case this evening. And I have 3 potential motions for you on the screen, and I can walk through each of these if the City Council would find that helpful. Otherwise, staff can stand for questions, and representatives of the application are in the audience this evening.
Thank you, Mr. McCann. Council, and I'll open the floor for discussion around this.
So it feels like the big reason for the additional access is so that they can have ADA, so that they can get up higher, right? You drive up to the parking lot. So, I mean, from reading all the emails we got, right? So people know, right? We read the emails we got. It feels like there's a little bit of disconnect between the church and the neighborhood, because my understanding from some of the reading is that the church wants to have the parking lot, we'll call it, of the 17 spaces to try and appease the neighborhood. But from the sounds of it, the neighborhood would prefer that on-street parking is used instead. And again, my understanding from reading all of this information is that, you know, most of the time for these burials, not a lot of people attend, right? And it maybe takes 20 minutes or so to take up, which isn't a lot of time and a lot of cars, But I think the concern that I'm hearing from residents is that that lot is going to get used for other things, whether it be, for Sunday services, for Saturday night services, for, the Lions, you see lots of cars out for the Lions softball tournament. So are people going to park down there for the softball tournament, the car show? I am understand the issue to make sure they're ADA compliant, but it does feel like there is a lot of more opportunity for that lot to be used than just the burial services. And I guess I hear, the residents' concerns that that road is now going to be much more used, and that it might be better for them if it is just on-street parking, because it's not going to get used, right? People aren't going to necessarily go down there because they can park other places for on-street parking. So why walk up a hill where if there's an actual parking lot, people are going to maybe want to use that for other uses. And I guess I have some concerns for the residents with that as well. I guess those are my initial thoughts. I probably have some more coming up, but I guess if anyone else wants to jump in, I guess.
I've watched all the planning commission meetings, read through everything, did my own research on ADA compliance for cemeteries. Just to be blunt, I don't know if I've ever approved or allowed or went through and had a variance with this much disconnect. Every variance I've ever gone with in the past has been some level of support from everybody. I think ADA requirements can be met with a sidewalk to the columbarium. I don't think you need to have a street with 17 cars for parking around it. I do think this changes the nature of the neighborhood. You're basically building a cul-de-sac off of the street itself. I know we can do that in other areas, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me in this neighborhood. Is there a reason why the path from the other parking lot can't be ADA compliant? Are there other tools to be used to make things ADA compliant? And is ADA compliancy a situation that is a uniqueness of the land? To me, I don't think it grants or it falls into the variance aspect. I think, the uniqueness test is not satisfied. I think that for the columbarium, go ahead and build it, have a cemetery, all of that. I'm even okay going with the setback moving from 30 feet to 5 feet. I'm not in support of having essentially a 17-car parking lot with a columbarium in the middle of it attached to the street. Those are my thoughts.
Can you show, maybe on the, I don't know if there's like a better map, like you can pull up like, exactly, because I drove back there today, right? And the hill is significant. Can you kind of show on a real world, like where it's hard to tell when you're showing it on the, in kind of this format?
Yes, council member and acting mayor, I will pull up a Google Maps image of the area to show the slope.
And so that's right, like going up that hill there would be where the road, the driveway would go. And about how far up would the parking structure, or for a better term, parking lot, I guess?
Council member, I don't believe I measured that. If I had to guess, it would probably be close to 80 to 100 feet out based on the looks of it, because this is 100 feet wide. It's probably relatively close to that distance. So imagine basically just past this electric pole here, this would be the location of the columbarium.
You said 80 to 100 feet out.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, I agree with Councilmember Pedersen. I agree. I do think it changes the street, the neighborhood. That didn't look it's hard to tell obviously on an image, but it did seem like there'd be ways where if you're parking on the street that you might be able to get, have ADA compliance going from the bottom versus the top. Obviously, we're not engineers, we don't know, but I am leaning with Councilmember Pedersen on the parking structure and access part of it. I guess I would disagree on the easement the request to change the setback from 30 to 5 feet. They're already adding, how many is it? 200 and some burial sites they have the ability to. I would side with what Planning Commission determined, right, was, maybe that's something better to come back at a later date when it's needed, because it does not seem like if you have a potential for 200 and some burial sites now, that's not something that's going to be needed for a while. So why make that decision now?
Is there anything within that setback other than the stubs that we need to worry about?
There is a 10-foot drainage and utility easement in the front yard, so those would have to be vacated as it gets closer to that area. But other than that, no.
Could we approve a smaller setback instead of 5? Maybe it's 15, or is that within our power or not? I don't know.
As far as I understand, that is a possibility. If you wanted to change the setback from 30 feet to 15 feet.
Yeah, so acting mayor, council members, you're doing a good job, I think, of applying the facts as you understand them from the Planning Commission. Obviously, a lot of input you've seen through the Planning Commission. You're applying those to the legal standard for a variance, so you're doing well. And yes, the answer is that you can grant a variance that is less than, more than, I don't know how to say that, but different than the requested variance if you find that a smaller, for example, a smaller setback variance is justified by the facts, but the full requested variance isn't justified by the facts. You can grant the smaller, the 15-foot setback instead of only 5 feet. You can do that. Yes.
Just to avoid utility easement issues down the road or whatever happens. The path. How does the path get from the parking lot to the columbarium? I mean, I'll say this to council. I mean, this almost to me feels like a rough draft. It's like this feels like a sketch plat to me, to use a planning commission term. It feels like this is a good start, and it feels like we need to add input and come up with different things to go through this. And I know staff has worked with them on it, but I just feel like adding this and granting all of the 2 variances right off the bat for something that doesn't feel complete would be a challenge for me. Anyway, back to the path. How does this work? I mean...
Sure. Acting mayor and council members, so here is a overall sketch of their proposed improvements. So here's the parking circle, the columbarium. Here's the path, starting with steps, going all the way up, weaving through the property to connect to the existing church property. I can pull up aerial approximately here to connect to their existing walking path behind the church.
Okay. I thought there was an establishment of a different path, but okay. Sorry. Thank you for clarifying that.
Council, any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I share Councilmember Pedersen's view that what we've seen after reviewing both the public input, the tabling of the planning commission review what we have here. This does feel as though this is not as succinct as this could be in terms of bringing forth the justification for the variance as proposed. The church definitely has a cemetery. If we want to be a little bit blunt about it, they're in the business of providing burial services and plots and things like that. And I don't feel like we have the information in front of us to determine if we're starting to wiggle around what was applied for in terms of setbacks, and in terms of, like, you know, for lack of a better expression, business loss of what does it mean to remove 40 grave sites. Of the 250 that were proposed, removing 40 represents 16% of what the proposal was. I don't think we have a good view on how much that economically means, and does that economics test that we would use as a finding of fact to say that we've satisfied this. You know, there's other things to take into consideration. For instance, if we look at the overall size that the property has for a cemetery, is this significant? Is it not? So, on the other hand, this is private property, so the concerns about people inappropriately parking there can be dealt with. Beyond signage, I think that we've heard that there is a reticence to do anything like a gate, and I understand that reticence of maintaining it and keeping people out. I also understand that that there's been brought up that the neighborhood likes to see people biking through there. In some respects, this could be, hey, maybe I want to bike in here, and then the next thing you know, we have an intrusion into bereavement services that we provide. So I feel as though we've got a little bit more homework to do on this from what's put before us today.
Ms. Hardy, any comments on your end?
I don't have any comments. Thank you, Acting Mayor.
You know, before I ask for a motion on this, I'd like to note for public record that I am a member of St. Victoria Catholic Church, and while legally I'm not required to recuse myself from this vote, I will be recusing myself for transparency reasons. With that, Council, if there was no further discussion on this, I'll entertain a motion.
I guess I'll make a motion. I will make a motion to deny the resolution approving 2 variance requests for St. Victoria Catholic Church at 8228 Victoria Drive, stating that it did not meet the uniqueness test due to available on-street parking. Also, for the setback, it did not meet the uniqueness test, as the church can still have over 200 burial plots without the variance.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is item 6.3, which is to consider a conditional use permit amendment and site plan and building materials review for Quick Trip. Presenting is Mr. McCann. Welcome back, Mr. McCann.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council members. Tonight we have 2 requests in front of us from Quick Trip. The first one being for final approval of their site plan and building materials application. And then secondly, being an amendment to their conditional use permit to allow dynamic display signage. As you're all aware at this point, the location and area is approximately one parcel on the northeast corner, about 4 acres in size. The total parcel area is about 48, but the specific area we're talking about is only 4 acres. They are proposing a 9,100 square foot convenience store with gas pumps and a car wash. It's located right off of County Road 11, north of County Road 10, but also south of the railroad and the Victoria Ridge development. The existing site conditions for those 4 acres, it is vacant farm fields. You may have seen some grading going on out in the area. They did receive preliminary grading approval, so they're getting started on the work out there in preparation for the Quick Trip site. There were not any trees on this parcel prior to grading. And then there is a 125-foot wide power line easement, which I'm sure you remember from past meetings that a portion of the road will go through this easement, but the structure in the parking lot for the Quick Trip will not. On Ridgeview Boulevard here and another on Crossings Parkway, they would also be able to get into the site from County Road 11 with a full access here. They have 10 gas pumps proposed and a single lane car wash on the north side of the building. Looking at their parking, they do meet the minimum requirements based on our code for retail stores and service establishments that would require 33 parking spaces. They're proposing 63 for the entire site. All of those drive aisles and spacing requirements for those parking stalls meet our minimum standards as well. Looking at pedestrian connections, they are proposing sidewalks along Ridgeview Boulevard and Crossings Parkway, highlighted in blue. They also have a sidewalk connection from Ridgeview Boulevard to get to the gas station building, highlighted in red, and then a future trail will also be constructed as part of County Road 11 improvements, highlighted in green on the right side of the screen. They did provide architectural renderings of what the structure will look like. It's your typical Quick Trip and Quick Trip gas station canopy. All of the materials that would be constructing for the building do meet our minimum design requirements for our commercial district. And then looking at lighting, they are proposing street lights, building lights, and gas station pump lights. They also provide a rendering on the image on the screen showing how the entire site will be illuminated while providing minimal impacts to adjacent traffic or residents of the apartment building that will be constructed just to the north. Looking at their signage, also pretty standard for Quick Trip. They're proposing 2 wall signs shown in the image at the top. They will also have an LED stripe with the Quick Trip logo on their gas station canopy, as well as some directional signage and parking signage. And then lastly, they are proposing a freestanding sign here displaying their gas prices as well as some of their promotional materials. This is what requires the conditional use permit amendment. Per our code, any illuminated signage for commercial uses requires a conditional use permit. That was not discussed when we went through the gas station or gas pump and car wash accessory uses for conditional uses. So they are applying for that now this evening to include it with their already approved conditional use permit. Based on the renderings that were provided, it does meet all of our sign regulations, except for requiring that conditional use permit, and it also complies with our general conditional use permit standards. So our Planning Commission did hold a public hearing at their meeting on June 17th, which was properly noticed. The city did not receive any comments on the application. The Planning Commission just had some general questions about the height and intent of the signage, and they did recommend unanimous approval of the requests. So here are some conditions that were incorporated in the resolution that you will be considering this evening. These conditions are in addition to the conditional use standards that were already approved with the gas pumps and the car wash. And then lastly, here are 2 motions for the City Council to consider this evening. The first one being for the site plan request and the second for the conditional use permit amendment. With that, staff can stand for questions, and a representative of the application is in the audience tonight.
Thank you, Mr. McCann. Council, I will now open up for discussion and comment.
I just have one quick question, just with our sign ordinance, is there any sort of like lumen display limits that we have? And I'm assuming with this conditional use permit, they're hitting that or below. I know we were going through new signage ordinances, so am I assuming everything correctly?
Councilmember, correct. Yes.
Good.
I just had a question on the lighting in general. I think you brought up minimal impact to the neighborhood and the highway and things like that. Can you describe that a little further? Thank you.
Good evening, Councilman and Mayor, our interim mayor, I guess. The lighting is all LED on our site. So, and the other part of that LED is that it sits up in the canopy or in the fascia. So when you're looking directly at the building, you're not gonna see a light bulb. It's gonna be up and in both canopies. So that is why we can have minimal impact, is because it actually sits up and it's LED. So it's not a typical fluorescent. And we follow very closely the LEED standards for lighting. And so we technically meet that requirement and always try and meet whatever the city code is.
Excellent, thank you.
I have a quick question for you on the dynamic display.
Yes,
So I'm drawing particular attention to where it says Karuba Coffee.
correct.
That part will frequently refresh. It might be Karuba Coffee one moment, the next might be 3 tacos for 35 cents. Wishful thinking, right?
29 cents a pound for bananas.
Okay. So, and in an area where you're going to have sight lines along the street, and there might be adjacent other similarly situated businesses, grocery stores, et cetera. That dynamic display is probably not something that is controversial. However, on the other side of the property to the north will be an apartment building that is, we come up before council. Would Quick Trip be amenable to having the dynamic display sort of frozen after a certain time of night? So yes, you could advertise Karuba Coffee from 10 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning, and that would be fixed. But then at 6 a.m., you could be bananas, tacos, the rolling Thuringers that just bake for 17 hours straight.
Yes, we would be amenable
can we bring
to-
that to.
Yes, I would bring that forward. Brian, is there a standard on dynamic displays of how many seconds they typically also do or don't change?
I believe it's 8 seconds.
But we would be, I know we would be open to leaving it static for 10 p.m. to 5 or 6 a.m. when traffic starts to roll again.
Great. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments, questions? Seeing no more discussion, this item requires 2 separate motions. Council, is there a motion?
Move to adopt the resolution approving a site plan building materials request for Quick Trip.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Council, can I get a motion?
Motion to adopt the resolution approving a conditional use permit amendment for Quick Trip. Do we need to say anything about?
Yeah, I
like,
would, right now,
in
as
this
we
one,
stand on your motion, I would deny. I would propose that we amend and make a condition of this, that the dynamic display would.
Be frozen.
Can we
Static
say
at 10 o'clock.
conditions discussed at the meeting? Or do I have to be specific?
Yeah, acting mayor council, I think it's pretty typical for staff to sort of write that for you. I think we get the concept that you're talking about. So if you want to make a motion incorporating that discussion, staff will write it up.
Motion to adopt the resolution approving a conditional use permit amendment for Quick Trip with conditions discussed at today's meeting.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Our next item is item 6.4, which is to consider a preliminary plat, annexation, comprehensive plan amendment, and preliminary PUD rezoning for West Creek Village residential development. Returning is Brian McCann. Mr. McCann.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and council members. We have 4 requests this evening from Lennar for the West Creek Village residential development. We are at the preliminary plat phase where all the detailed applications and more of the focus city review is conducted, also where their major entitlements are granted, such as any conditional use permits or variances if those were part of their application requests. So looking at this, this project has gone through 2 different sketch plat reviews, the first one being in July and August of last year. That first proposal, if you recall, was for 148 townhomes and 13 single-family homes. Their revised sketch plat has a bit more of the mix of product types, including single-family, twin homes, and townhomes. That one was reviewed more recently, just this past March, by the council. So their 4 applications this evening include their preliminary plat, a comprehensive plan amendment to change the future land use designation areas located on the 2 parcels for consideration, as well as preliminary PUD rezoning and an annexation request. Looking at the location area, as I mentioned, it's 2 parcels, about 89 acres in size, located near our South Growth area. It is just north of County Road 10, Angler Boulevard. It's west of the existing Marsh Hollow development, and it is south of the Marsh Lake Hunting Club. So with this, they are proposing 50 single-family, 56 townhomes. The existing conditions of the site, it is a generally flat, vacant farmland. There are some wetlands noted on the screen there throughout the site, and a portion of the West Chaska Creek runs through the north side of the property. Here's the preliminary plat that was submitted and included in your packet this evening. The area in yellow is the area mostly impacted by the Shoreland Overlay District, with that creek running through the north side. In the red are the proposed 56-foot wide single-family homes, and then in the green areas where the medium density products are, with the proposed 56 townhomes and 18 twin homes. Looking at our comprehensive plan, it's currently guided for a blend of low density and medium density residential, with some areas of open space and a very, very small pocket of commercial down at the south side of the site across the railroad tracks. A comprehensive plan amendment is required, and there is a resolution for consideration in your packet this evening. It's worth noting that that would require a supermajority vote. Since we only have 4 council members, we would need 4 votes to approve that resolution this evening. What that resolution would do is alter the low and medium density areas on our future land use map, while also changing a portion for those 13 single-family homes to comply with our conservation residential district, allowing a lower density area, and then just changing this portion of commercial to open space because it's impacted by wetlands. It's not really usable commercial area. Looking at our density for the site, our existing citywide density right now is just under 3.5 units per acre. With these proposed density adjustments, staff calculated it out to be a 0.11 reduction in our overall density for the city. As you may recall, right now our 2040 requirement is 3 units per acre, so we're still safe there. With our 2050 requirement, this would get us a little bit further away from that threshold, but we do have a lot of medium density guided areas throughout the city that could be incorporated with future developments to get that number back up. Looking at the actual density breakdown of the product types for that conservation residential district, that would allow half a unit per acre up to 2.25. They would fall within that guidance at 1.1 units per acre. For the remaining single-family areas, allowing 2.25 to 6 units per acre, they'd be at 4.71. And then for the twin homes and townhomes, the range being 6 to 12 units per acre, they would be at 7.14 for those units. So what that actually looks like when you're adjusting the map, I tried to prepare an exhibit here included in the resolution to show that a small portion of low density would be guided to medium here. The east side adjacent to the wetlands would be guided to low density, and then that conservation residential pocket up on the north side adjacent to that creek. Looking at annexation and rezoning, it's currently within Laketown Township, so it does not have a current zoning designation. When an annexation occurs, it automatically becomes agricultural zoned. The township did approve the annexation request, so now it's just up to the city council. There's another resolution in your packet this evening to consider the annexation request. After that would go off to the state for final approval. Looking at their proposed rezoning from agriculture, though, they'd be looking at PUD with underlying R1 for the single family, and then PUD with underlying R3 for the twin homes and townhomes. Rezonings are required for all of those that I just mentioned, which are discretionary items. And then included in the slide, as always, our planned unit development process. Just a reminder, that's to allow development that is sensitive to environmental, cultural, and economic considerations. And at preliminary plat is where we really start to look at and consider the details of this development moving forward. So, looking at the deviations that they are proposing for the R1 single family, it's worth noting that these are just minimum requirements. These will not apply to every single lot. I think the minimum lot area proposed for 5,672 square feet actually only applies to a couple of the lots proposed. I think the average is more so around 7,800 square feet. Looking at the other requirements, they're also asking for reductions in lot width, depth, as well as our front and rear setbacks. Notably, the rear setback for those lots adjacent to the wetlands on the east side, we want to allow improvements in rear yards without impacting homeowners. We don't want a bunch of deck variances coming in requesting that setback. We want to try to get ahead of the game on that and incorporate a slightly reduced setback here so that people can have improvements to their home in the future. Then looking at a reduction in side setbacks and an increase for those lots outside of shoreland up to 55% for maximum impervious. And then the non-shoreland areas will meet the minimum shoreland requirements, which I'll cover later. And then for the R3 twin home proposal, they're requesting a reduction in the minimum lot area and the minimum lot width, which you can see there. And then townhomes would meet all of the requirements, except they are proposing to increase the impervious in our R3 district for townhomes from 75% to 80%. So not a large increase there, but also a deviation that should be noted. So looking at how this compares to other recently approved developments in the city, looking at Marsh Hollow and Huntersbrook specifically, two of our recent developments within the last few years here, you can see a lot of deviations were also approved for those. Some of them are the same, such as the front and rear setbacks. Some of them are actually more, like the side setbacks and impervious surfacing. And then some of them aren't as big, but still deviations such as the minimum lot area. Then looking at twin homes, so there weren't any existing or recent twin home products to look at to compare these two deviations, so that table remains unchanged. But looking at townhomes, specifically the Marsh Hollow development townhomes and the Victoria Ridge development townhomes, both of those were approved at 95%. So that 80% proposal in comparison is relatively minimal. So some considerations for the city council tonight. Rezonings and PUDs are discretional, as I mentioned. The applicant is also proposing a trail connection to the Marsh Hollow neighborhood to the east. as well as sidewalks on both sides within the townhome area. Their proposed development also provides various housing products that the city council last desired when they were reviewing the sketch plat, with 10 different single-family product types, twin homes and townhomes, meeting that 6 to 12 unit per acre density without falling below that threshold. And then looking at their proposed PUD standards, as I mentioned, they won't apply to every lot. Only 3 of those single-family lots are proposed less than 7,000 square feet. Some additional guest parking is also proposed within the townhome area, and they incorporate some or most of these standards in some of our recent developments, such as Marsh Hollow and Hunters Brook. So looking at some of the single-family architectural renderings that were provided, these would meet all of our minimum design requirements in our zoning code. And then for reference on what the actual product type would look on the ground in the neighborhood, Lennar did provide some images of some of their existing neighborhoods and how finished neighborhoods look with some of these products. Moving on to the acreage lots, those are those shoreland lots. There are some renderings provided here to show what those would look like. These would also meet our requirements, and then there is a public cul-de-sac on the north side of Creekside Lane proposed with this development. That would be these products seen in the right here. Then here is a rendering of what the twin homes would look like. And again, for reference, just what a neighborhood would look like if these twin homes were developed, similar to how the applicant is proposing this evening. Then moving on to the townhomes, these are the different architectural elevations that were provided to show some of their different designs for their row townhomes and how these would look in a neighborhood as well. Looking at lighting and signage, they are proposing various street lights highlighted in red on the image on the right at various intersections, as well as along pedestrian connections, sidewalks, trails, things like that, to provide visibility. And then they also are proposing a monument sign for the southwest corner of Creekside Lane and Street D. We will take a closer look at that at the building permit phase to make sure it's outside of easements, it meets height, illumination, all our signage requirements. Then looking at parking, our minimum code standards say 2 enclosed spaces per unit for single family products and 2 spaces with at least 2 enclosed for half of the units and 1 enclosed space for the remainder. So that comes out to about 1.5 enclosed spaces for every 2 townhomes. Based on the renderings that were just shown, they should be meeting all those requirements. Every single one of those products had at least 2 garage stalls. They are also showing parking limited to one side, highlighted in the blue along Street D and Street E here. But with that, they are also proposing 31 guest parking stalls highlighted in red in the image on the right. That's a additional incorporation by the applicant that is not a requirement that we currently have in our code. Based on all of that, all of our minimum parking standards should be met. Looking at pedestrian connections, they are proposing a 8-foot trail highlighted in green along the south side of Creekside Lane. They're also proposing a 6-foot wide sidewalk connection between one of the private drives and the public cul-de-sac. They're also showing 6-foot sidewalks throughout the remainder of the development, including those sidewalks on both sides in the townhome area, kind of wrapping around the stormwater ponds, the proposed park area, and some of the townhomes and guest parking stalls. Looking at their landscaping, all the requirements are generally met, including our boulevard spacing requirements, the number of plantings per R1 lot and per R3 standards. They are not required to incorporate any buffers, so none are proposed, but they did provide additional plantings in some of those heavily trafficked areas, such as along Creekside Lane for the backside of some townhomes. They are also meeting the minimum 50% open space requirement for the R1 and the 25% for the R3. And they did indicate on the plans that foundation plantings will be incorporated for the townhome and twin home products. Looking at tree preservation, they would need to comply with our removal threshold of 20% without replacement, or if they exceed that, which they're proposing to do in this case, they have to make up those lost inches with additional plantings on the development. So they're proposing 789 inches of replacement trees, which comes out to be about 316 trees meeting our minimum size standard. Looking at the shoreland overlay, as I mentioned, some of those lots are within 300 feet of West Chaska Creek. So those standards, they have to meet a minimum 75-foot lot width. All the images, all the lots highlighted in yellow do meet that minimum width requirement for lots adjacent to tributaries. And each of those lots will also have a 25% maximum impervious. There was a exhibit included in the submittals that showed an averaging of the entire wetland area or shoreland area, and 25% of that, that's not how it works. It's been communicated to the developers, so they'll have to incorporate that with future submittals. That's 25 per lot, not a 25% average of the area. Looking at park dedication, their requirement, they would need to dedicate about 4.3 acres or a cash fee in lieu of about $452,000. They are proposing some segments of 8-foot trails along Creekside Lane and that connection to Marsh Hollow that I mentioned, as well as a quarter-acre park. Most, if not all of those areas would be allowed to be a reduction in their required parkland dedication. It wouldn't satisfy the amount fully, but it would certainly help with their maximum contribution amounts. And the Parks and Recreation Committee did review this development twice. In both cases, they were supportive of the cash fee in lieu of land. And I will pass it over to Kara for a little bit.
Ms. Guerin.
Good evening, Acting Mayor, members of the City Council. I don't know why I always want to use that instead. So I'm going to touch base on streets, utilities, and stormwater management. Primarily focusing on streets, since this was a topic we covered quite a bit when this came through twice, I think, for sketch plat review. So shown on the graphic here is where the applicant landed through many discussions with city staff related to public streets versus private streets. So the bluish, purple-blue streets are all public. So Creekside Lane, which is a neighborhood collector through our South Growth area that runs through Marsh Hollow, would continue through the site, and that because it's a collector, no driveways are allowed on that roadway. That will eventually connect into what will be Red Fox Drive, which will extend from Marsh Lake Road down to County Road 10. And then one private cul-de-sac to the north, and then two public cul-de-sac to the north, and then two private streets serving these lots up here. And then the area that we had discussed quite a lot was this area over here. So they are proposing a private street in this location, and I would describe where we landed to be similar to what is proposed and being constructed in the Victoria Ridge neighborhood, so just south of the tracks. So this is proposed as a private street with a similar footprint, a 24-foot wide street. We went that route, if you recall from the discussion we had with the council at the sketch plat phase. This results in a street that will have a different look and feel than the rest of the public streets. The development agreement language that was adopted and included in the Victoria Ridge development has been provided to the applicant to be included in the development agreement for this project. That includes language about them being responsible for, in addition to snow removal and the typical things that they would be responsible for, they would be responsible for the sanitary sewer and water services from the unit out to the main. That was an area we had talked about where we were running into some of the issues in our other private street situations where we'd have a leak at the curb stop and you're trying to make repairs to a curb stop in an area that you're starting to get into people's front yard. That was creating some challenges in the Whispering Hills neighborhood. So that's how we resolved it in the Victoria Ridge neighborhood. And then the development agreement includes language about them needing to provide information about them planning for the replacement for that private street, maintenance and replacement of the pavement itself over time. So that language has been provided to Lennar and did not raise any concerns. Additionally, then, with the Red Street area, their association will provide for the snow removal, which eliminates that circumstance that we were concerned about with the type of units here, where you'll have where you would have the city plow truck coming through at a different time than the contractor who's doing the snow removal for the driveways, creating that challenge for the folks who live there trying to get out for work in the morning. So staff do feel like in this particular circumstance, this is consistent with what was done in Victoria Ridge. And so the preliminary plat that was submitted did show this as a private street. So did want to highlight that in particular for the city council, since we had talked about it quite a bit. Okay, moving on from there, access to Highway 10. We did talk about this previously back over here. So on the south end of this cul-de-sac, they are showing an emergency gated access only to County Road 10 because we don't have a full access to County Road 10 yet. We aren't allowed to have one in this location because we're too close to the railroad tracks. But the county has agreed to allow this connection here for emergency access. Once we have development continue to the west and we have access, this emergency connection will go away. But this will be gated, and the people who will have access to it will be emergency services only, so we won't have residents trying to drive in and out through here. And then grading and stormwater management, typical need to meet Carver County WML rules in this case, and wetlands, wetland buffers, and stormwater facilities are on outlots deeded to the city, which is our typical practice. Utilities are being extended from Creekside Lane. We have our usual comment on well number 6. The well is complete. We're still working through permitting with the DNR. If it keeps raining, that helps our case. But now it's hot, so we'll see. We did note this previously as a future search area for an additional water treatment plant. We did conclude that we don't want to locate it on this particular property. If the city council and the city starts to consider development to the west of here, if this preliminary plat gets approved, the parcel to the west of here is outside of our 2030 boundary. You saw a sketch plat for that parcel some number of months ago, but if this project moves forward and we start to consider development west of here, we are going to have to start to pin down a location for that treatment plant before we proceed beyond our 2030 boundary.
So with that, here are some considerations to help guide discussion this evening if need be. These questions were incorporated with your council packet just for you to consider beforehand. These questions can also be available to ask staff or the applicant. Looking at the public hearing and planning commission meeting that occurred last week, it was properly noticed. We did have one individual that showed up that had some general questions about how this development could impact their property regarding that emergency gated access because they're adjacent to that area. And then the planning commission did discuss the proposed density and product types of the development, as well as future traffic impacts and drainage impacts that are potential. They did end up recommending unanimous approval of the requests. With that, if the city council does decide to follow planning commission's recommendation and approve all the applications, there are some suggested conditions on the screen that were included in your packet. With that, I do have some sample motions for you on the screen. We will need 3 separate motions, the first one being for the preliminary plat and preliminary PUD. the second for the annexation, and the third for the comprehensive plan amendment. And remember, that requires approving vote from all four of you. And with that, staff can stand for questions, and a representative from Lennar is in the audience this evening.
Thank you, Mr. McCann and Ms. Guerin. Appreciate that. Council, I'll open it up for discussion.
I'd only make one comment in that with respect to the 60 homes that are on the wetland, that's a lot of homes that have no sidewalk on that side. And so for anybody who wants to get anywhere and be a walkable part of this neighborhood, they're going to have to cross the street and use the sidewalk on the other side, which is shared by an equally large number of homes as well. I would be supportive of having the developer put sidewalk along what looks like Street D to have a continuous sidewalk through that side, so somebody could be along Creekside and be able to use their property to exit the neighborhood without having to go across the street, through traffic, and then cross the street again, cross the street again. So that would be a recommendation that I would put in contingent approval of this.
Can you put your cursor over Street D again? I just want to make sure yep, okay.
Yeah, so this picture is flipped. The north is.
Yeah, it's. Thank you.
So I see here it says community park. So, but we talked earlier about money in lieu of a park. Is this just like meant for the? Is that just like a small little area for those townhomes?
Council member, yes, this would be an area for the residents of that community. It's only about a quarter acre in size, so those 4.3 acres of dedication that are necessary, this would only subtract out a quarter acre that will still need them to provide at least 4 acres of park dedication in the amount of fee to replace that.
And can you remind me, just because there's a lot of where the closest park would be for that, like if they want to get there, the closest park for this community?
Yes. Sorry, not quite sure what I'm doing here with the screen. Bear with me. Yes. I can pull up our GIS for reference. The closest park would be the Marsh Hollow Park, which is the development just to the east. So here is Creekside Lane where that would extend. Here is the Marsh Hollow development, and this property right here is the Marsh Hollow Park. I believe it's about a quarter mile, if that, from this development. So it's a relatively short walk to access the closest public park.
And there would be sidewalks or trails that would lead there, right?
Correct.
Okay. I mean, otherwise, I would just say, I think the developer did a nice job taking our feedback and planning commission's feedback and really trying to, have some, add a little bit more character, I guess I would say, right, with the different types of homes that you're offering and such. So I'm pleased with the changes that were made.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I think the product types, the changes are some excellent movement from initial discussions. I also think parking. I think I heard a bonus parking comment of 31 spaces, so that's always a nice adder as well. So, but no, the product type is a lot of great movement there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we made comments about the quality of the product, and this goes a long way. I'm going to reiterate that for the next park being on the other side of a wetland, a quarter mile away, that 60 plus homes not served by safe walking path, i.e. a sidewalk, is a weakness that we really should have overcome this. Lennar has put some other product and developments in throughout Victoria. They've done sidewalks on both sides of it. It definitely lends a community feel. There's going to be, for sure, a lot of strollers and a lot of dogs that are going to be going through here and keeping them out of the street, across the street, and have sidewalk on their side of the street is, I think, a prudent move for us to require that now.
I concur with that. I just ask, is there any negative to putting a sidewalk on both sides? Go ahead.
Acting mayor and council members, the only thing that I could anticipate is potential impacts with some of the fiber issues we've been having. But if the sidewalk was relocated from this side of Street D and incorporated on this side of the street, I think that would resolve the issue. I don't know about the possibility of sidewalks on both sides. I think we might run into that fiber issue, but if we just relocate where that sidewalk is located on which side of the street, it should resolve it. And I'm looking to Kara and our representative from Lennar here to see if that would be a viable option.
I'll just jump in first on the fiber issue. They have to go on both sides, so it's a problem no matter what. We did speak with Lennar about dedicating some corridors in rear yard areas in some of these townhome areas to provide access to the homes for the fiber in the rear yard areas. So we are trying to anticipate some alternatives to that. So I forgot to note that we are trying to explore other options, but I'll leave the sidewalk question to Lennar.
Can you state your name and?
Acting Mayor and members of council, Josh Metzer with Lennar. Happy to be back tonight. And thank you to staff for the staff report and summary. And we've been at this one for over a year now, and that's not always the case with every community. If we run into certain difficulties, we'll sometimes walk away. But we love Victoria. Like being here. We've been successful here and want to continue that. So we worked very hard with our engineer and with city staff, and obviously a couple of times through commission and council, and have tried to take everything, all the input, and have a plan here that we think works well for the city. Certainly will work well for us with the mix too. As far as the sidewalk, it's pretty standard here in Victoria to have sidewalk on one side of the street. I know in Lake Town, in the single family areas, there's sidewalk on only one side of the street. Brookmore, I don't recall, is one side of the street. So here, part of the reason we're having it on the west side is to limit the number of driveways that the sidewalk is crossing. And it's actually 31 homes on that east side that don't have the east side of Street D. It's not 60, it's 31 that wouldn't have sidewalk. Well, I guess if you're counting the other the 3 on Street E that aren't directly on a sidewalk. But as Kara mentioned, part of the reason that we located, we did add a sidewalk to both sides of the street in the townhome area as was requested, but on the one side you'll notice it's at the rear of the townhomes. Again, that's to try to make some room for the massive amounts of fiber apparently that's going to be coming into the city. So I think those are a couple of reasons, not that we're not showing sidewalk on the east side there. And with that number of driveways crossing sidewalk there, you're going to have sidewalk replacement. That's going to be assessments to those homeowners in the future. So those are the reasons why we're looking at one side of the street.
I would also add on the sidewalk, I completely understand your comments, Councilmember Ivansky. I don't know if it's just my neighborhood, right? So the Woodlands, I live in the Woodlands. It's an older neighborhood, so maybe you know, we only have sidewalks on one side of the street, but also I would say, and again, I don't know if this is just my neighborhood or if this is a lot of neighborhoods, people a lot of times don't use the sidewalk anyways, even if they're there. They walk in the street. And that, honestly, I think a big reason that it happens nowadays is because people who have pets have electric fences, and dogs just run right up to that border, right, where there's not a fence, and people are uncomfortable, even though they know they're probably going to stop. They're nervous, and if they're walking dogs, 90% of the people walk in the street in my neighborhood. Again, I don't know if that's uncommon and it's not like that in other neighborhoods, but people just don't seem to use the sidewalks in my neighborhood. So I'm like, for me, I don't think sidewalks on one side or not having them on both sides is a big issue. I know we have lots of neighborhoods that have sidewalks on just one side.
Okay, I stand corrected. It's 31 homes, but I still maintain that I'm unsympathetic to the plight of putting in fiber. It's generally speaking, I know we've had a lot of complaints about it recently, the number of providers, but in the long arc of livability and walkability, the fiber is going to be a 1 to 2 year issue. I'm not really convinced that the argument about assessment for sidewalk replacement holds water. I think that we have a number of homes here that we want them out of the street. We want them, again, there's going to be young families. We want them safe from traffic. Chad, I think that maybe the reason that people use the street instead of the sidewalk is because it is only on one side. And we have plenty of examples in Victoria where we have sidewalks on both sides. And it just keeps people grounded to their homes and makes Victoria more walkable to be able to access the lakes and parks that we have.
Any other?
The addition of the sidewalk, though, will that make our impermeable surface requirements, I mean, it'll deepen from what you're already requested on the PUD, which is from 35% to 55%. So we're probably looking at having to go to 60.
The sidewalk would actually be located in the right of way.
Okay,
Beyond the
be
front property line.
that one count.
So when-
Sorry, rookie question again. Sorry. I'd like to see a sidewalk on that side of the street, but I could live without it. Could go with you. My question's on the parking. Could we go to that parking picture? You turn in and you have parking on the left, then you have parking on the right, then you have parking on the right, then the left all the way up. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, council member, the reason for that is because you can't park in front of a driveway. If you look at how the parking is aligned along Street D, you'll notice it's on this side of the street adjacent to where there is limited parking with the driveways for the 56-foot wide lots on the east side. And then it flips here where the townhomes start because there are a lot more driveways, so the parking flips to the opposite end where it can accommodate those denser driveways, I guess I'll say.
Okay. I mean, my only question would be why not keep it on one side of the street, but I think you can get a few more cars if you flip it on the other side. I'm just saying there might be some confusion down the road. I mean, if I pulled in, I might be parking in front of 27, 28, 29, doing it illegally, not knowing, but anyway. Very small thing. And just a weird question, the emergency access road, is that dirt, paved, rock? What is that made out of?
Council member, I believe that would also be paved and gated on both sides so that people aren't trying to exit from the cul-de-sac or trying to enter from County Road 10. And then
Gotcha.
that would just be removed when development occurs further west.
I don't know why I thought it was important, but
Any other comments, questions? I guess from the sidewalk perspective, I see Councilmember Avansky's point. I think the majority of the neighborhoods I'm seeing do have just one sidewalk on those roads, and I do see some street walkers, et cetera. So I would be fine with one sidewalk on this personally, on the street, but I think some strong points were made as well for the other side. Am I understanding that it's just not possible from your perspective?
I mean, I think from a builder perspective, I think it's possible. I think maybe more of a city engineering question. I think for us, I mean, it's possible, probably not preferred.
Well, the city engineering side was more tied to fiber, right?
The fiber technically needs to be in the drainage and utility easement outside of the right-of-way, so not where the sidewalk is. I just was running through the plans and didn't see any big red flags. Should the council vote to require it on both sides? Obviously, it hasn't been designed yet, but just a quick review, I didn't see any obvious red flags with it.
I'll just continue to belabor the point that, this development is almost a race to the bottom when we look at how much we've compromised standards everywhere. Impervious surfaces, lot width, square footage. We're shoehorning a whole lot of infrastructure into a very small, narrow path. I don't think it's an unreasonable ask to be able to get something that's going to improve the safety in the neighborhood, the quality of life for walkability. Let's also bring into mind that I think that the lack of 2 entrances to this neighborhood for fire equipment and having to solve with an emergency road and, is a compromise. I think that it's a reasonable ask to, well, it may not be preferred by the developer and the builder, it's possible, and this is the time for us to ask for something that is going to be, if we don't do it now, it'll never happen. So, council members, that's my pitch to you.
Well stated. Any other comments?
My only thought, just the side yard setbacks at 8 feet, it gets tight. Do we need to make sure that there's some level of engineering, i.e. drain tiles that go in there? Because everything's going to flow down to that wetland. And I know the storm sewer is going to be there. I'm not sure how that's all going to flow out. But over the course of time, trees are going to develop. There's not going to be enough sun there. That whole thing's going to start sliding away. I see it in my neighborhood, the other neighborhood just north of us where the homes were kind of packed together. There's just rock between the homes now. Is there anything that we can do to help mitigate any future problems with erosion and situations where the side yards just become mush pits? I don't know. That's a question for all of us.
I think this is a perennial issue that we continually keep going over and over and over with this on side yard setbacks. And the answer is increase them. And that comes at the developer's cost of having 1 or 2 less lots that they can develop and sell a home and make profits off of it. So it's a question of where do we hold the line on this issue? Our bottom of this is at 7.5 feet as an example. We've brought this up before. Josh, I respect you. I really appreciate you working with the city over the years. The development that is over by the high school, we went through this before where we wanted 10, they wanted 7.5. We got to 9. I thought that was a great compromise. Here we're trending back the other way, back to 8. And that's the way you solve the problem that you propose, Councilmember Pedersen, is you have to give up land in order to get it. Because I also
Knock out
understand
two
that we're
houses.
talking about Whispering Hills where they're even probably tighter than 7.5 feet. That rock is the only acceptable way to deal with that. So I think that at 8 feet, it's better than 7.5. Which is, been typical down in this part of Victoria. If we want to address what you're talking about, then we just need to be very disciplined and rigid on not going below where our standards are, that, or take a slight compromise to it, but we're not going to get there with where you're talking about with these lower side yard setbacks.
I will say, we're taking what was almost 20 net acres of medium density and reducing that down to 11 and a half. We're going from what was previously proposed as 72 row townhomes, 25-foot wide lots, 0 setback, to 37 single-family homes at 56 feet wide with 8-foot side setbacks. Kara, I may be wrong, but I believe slope standards have been revised in recent years to try to assist with drainage. Maybe Kara can speak to that. Slope standards.
Scared?
Sure. So we run back and forth between two problems in Victoria, where we go back and forth between slopes that are too flat, where people have standing water, and swales that don't drain. So we modified our minimum slopes to be a minimum of 3% after Lennar had the pleasure of running drain tile all over Lake Town for second, third, fourth edition, those townhome units, because none of those swales were drying. Whispering Hills has a combination of areas where they have areas that are too flat, that aren't draining, that the HOA has drain tiled, and then conversely, areas that are too steep, that are backing up to wetlands. So it is a challenge with all of our topography between flat slopes and steep slopes. So we have modified on the minimum side, but on the steep side, it is a bit of a challenge because while we regulate at the development basis for maximum and minimum slopes, when the lot is purchased and the home is built, the homeowner, the home buyer, and the builder are working on their own lot grading. We aren't in a position where we as a city are running around dealing with everybody's individual lot grading between themselves as the buyer of the lot and the builder of the home. So that's not a service that we've provided to the community. It would be a costly service for the city to get into the business of providing that. I'm not aware of communities that have that level of engagement on a lot-by-lot basis as homes are getting built. But it certainly is a challenge that builders who have built here have some experience with. So, Lennar has been here a while. So I suspect on the building side, they have some experience with our soils and our condition compared to situations where we've had new builders.
I'm just
I
saying
don't know
that,
if I answered your question.
I'm just saying I want to protect the future homeowners, and I don't know what Lennar's deal is with the homeowners. If something happens within 3 years, we'll come in and start drain tiling and fixing this for you or whatever, but protect you from some extent to make sure that anything you can do to start off with, we're doing it the best we can. So as long as you
Homes do
feel,
remain under warranty. I'm not sure the exact period on this type of issue, but they are under warranty. And, once our homes are graded, we have to, provide a as-built grading plan to the city for review so that they can ensure that it was graded to plan.
fair
I'll
enough.
just note on that, though, we don't, we're just looking for general conformance with the development plan when we review a survey. We aren't looking at, how exact side yards are graded and some of those issues that you were referring to, Councilmember Pedersen. So it is that challenge for the, buyer of the lot to work with the seller of the lot to land with an end product that as an HOA they're satisfied with, or as a home buyer they're satisfied with. So it certainly is a challenge.
Thank you.
I will say overall, it's very evident that you guys are working to make this work, your movement on the overall product type, what we asked for, things like that. That's very well noted here, so just in general. Any more comment, question, discussion? Seeing no more discussion, staff is asking for 3 separate motions on this item. 1 to adopt the preliminary plat and PUD, 1 to adopt the resolution approving annexation, and a 3rd relating to a comprehensive plan amendment, and this amendment requires a supermajority, I believe, and the other 2 are simple majority. So I will now entertain motions.
Motion to adopt the preliminary plat and preliminary PUD for West Creek Village residential development.
And a second. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye.
I,
Opposed?
I'm going to be opposed. I'll amend my proposal to accept if we can concur that we'll put sidewalks in on the east edge of those homes. That's so we would make that a condition of the preliminary plat.
Has the clerk noted the division?
Yes, I have.
Yep.
Well,
I believe this needed a simple majority though, so the motion carries.
but if we're gonna approve this all, right, like we need the supermajority for the 3rd one, so I feel like there's gotta be some,
We need the supermajority for the 3rd.
for the 3rd motion,
Yeah.
and if you don't get that, right, then the rest is pointless, isn't it, right? Like, I mean,
Attorney Vos, any?
Well, Mayor and Council, I guess I'm not positive of the timing on the 3rd of the 3 motions, the motion related to the comp plan amendment, but you will at some point in the future have 5 members present. And so I just would make that point. But no, otherwise, I take it that the motion that was just made and approved would encompass the staff recommended conditions. There's quite a list of conditions. I understood the motion to be adopting the resolution as drafted by staff. If the council member wants to, so that motion has been passed now. So if the council member though wants to make a motion to add a condition, I don't think that's out of order. I think that'd be okay to do. And then I guess you'd go forward with your other motions depending on how that one comes out.
So we could do that as timing this evening?
Yep. Yeah, if the council member wanted to make a motion to amend the now approved resolution, that would be in order, I think. I don't know if it gets a second, but that would be in order. And I think I've said, as to the comp plan, I don't know that there's a timing issue there. Brian would tell us if there was. I think he's shaking his head no, so I don't think there's a timing issue. So it's right that if it doesn't pass tonight because you can't achieve a supermajority, that can come back to the council when there are 5 members present.
Well, council member.
I have a question.
Yep.
Was the comment that if the 3rd motion is denied tonight, we can come back when there is a 5-member council
On the comp plan.
on the comp plan? So if it is, for some reason, not super majority tonight, that doesn't,
It doesn't preclude any of these other motions from going.
because I read something in code that says that if something is not wholly approved, we cannot come back for 6 months with that same application.
Go ahead, Brian.
That is correct. So in this scenario, if we want to consider the comprehensive plan amendment item at the next meeting, I would recommend that the city council table instead of denying the request.
For the third motion.
Correct.
You would only need 3 of us to table it? Or would you still need a supermajority because it's?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, being totally transparent, we've used that word a couple of times tonight. I don't, at the city level, put a lot of water in the bucket of we've written into the code, we can't bring it back. The council can always reconsider actions it's taken. So, I mean, if you wanted to follow Robert's rules, which we do sort of at council meetings here and in the vast majority of cities around the state, I guess if you felt that the third motion, if you were going to take action on the third motion tonight and you wanted to be able to bring back a motion to reconsider, you would vote against the motion because only a person who voted against a motion can technically, under Robert's rules, bring a motion to reconsider an action. So, but now we're getting into, I mean, this is not Congress, right? If 4 of you want to do something, my view is that there is a procedural way to do that. So notwithstanding the code language that Lennar and staff is pointing out, I understand that that's the case, but I think in the normal course, you would allow a motion to reconsider at the next meeting when you have a full council.
Well, and that said, I'll make a motion to amend the resolution we just passed to add a condition that those home sites on the east edge of Street D would have sidewalks the full length from Street B into Street D. I'll put that motion forward, and then the rest of you can vote on that. And
Can I get a second on that?
Can I vote yes for both? I mean, covers me. I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So a motion to adopt the resolution approving annexation for the West Creek Village residential development.
Can I get a second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Motion to adopt the resolution authorizing submittal of a comprehensive plan amendment to the Metropolitan Council of the West Creek Village residential development.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Everything registered from clerk's perspective here. Okay, thank you. Council, there are no more items on our regular agenda. We'll now move on to reports and emerging issues. Attorney Vos, any reports?
Acting Mayor, I don't. Thank you.
Ms. Hardy, any reports from staff?
None from staff.
Okay. Members of the council, any reports, emerging issues, updates?
None.
Okay. If there are no more items to come before the body of this meeting, may I ask for a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.